The meeting will start in 1 minute.
Go. Well, good afternoon, Sioux Falls. This is the meeting of the Charter Revision Commission. We'll call the meeting to order and have Carrie Hainsel, the secretary, read off the roll call.
Susan Aguilar?
Here.
Jill Enteman?
Here.
Pauline Politis?
Here.
Justin Smith?
Here.
Bob Timian?
Here.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and we want to thank the 5 members of the Charter Revision Commission for either re-upping on their service to the city or coming on as new members to the Charter Revision Commission. The Charter Revision Commission is something that's established both by city charter and also by city ordinance. The city ordinance requires that this group meet at least once every calendar year. Since we have an election coming up in April of 2016, where there could be any possible charter amendments proposed to the voters at that time, we anticipate that this group will be doing some more diligent activity over the course of the fall and the early winter months if there are any proposals to be placed on the ballot for 2016. I think the first order of business would probably be to elect a chair and a vice chair. As the city attorney, I'm only the ex officio non-voting member of the commission, so I would leave it up to you folks to now make a motion for a chair and a second, and then vote on a chair, and then also the same for a vice chair.
I'd like to nominate Bob Timian for chair.
Second.
Any other nominations? Seeing none, we'll take a roll call vote. Motion for just their names, yes or no?
Sue Aguilar?
Yes.
Jill Enteman?
Yes.
Pauline Politis?
Yes.
Justin Smith?
Yes.
Bob Timian?
It's your meeting, Mr. Chairman.
Our first item of business will be election of a vice chair. Floor is open for nominations.
I'd like to nominate Sue Aguilar.
Second.
Any other nominations? Hearing none, we'll vote on that.
Jill Enteman?
Yes.
Pauline Politis?
Yes.
Justin Smith?
Yes.
Bob Timian?
Yes.
Sue Aguilar?
Yes.
Thank you. With that, I think we can get on to the business. Pauline and I have served on this previously, so been through the process, and I think the other 3 of you are familiar with what's going to happen here. The goal is that we would submit a report to the city by January for what would go on the ballot in April. And so at this point, what we have before us is what kind of a framework we use. And if I could, I'd like to give you a little background. The first time we went through this, what we did is we had meetings and had people make any suggestions they wanted and went that way. The second time, we broke it down, the charter down into various sections, and we would review each section, we would have a discussion, then ask for input, public input on those sections, and we just posted it and said, here's what's going to be on the agenda, this is the sections we're talking about. If you have any input, you could come there. I thought of the two, the second worked better. I don't know, Pauline, what would you say?
I agree.
So would that seem reasonable to everyone, that we were to address the charter and have on the agenda various sections? Then the next time would be meeting dates. This is September, and so we're going to probably need an October, November, and December date so that we can finish our work and have a wrap-up meeting in January. Have people looked at their calendars to see what dates might work for them?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, we do try and keep kind of a consistent time and day of the week too, so the public kind of gets used to it. If we are going to do monthly, but I mean, obviously it's all up to your calendars. Your citizen volunteers, we really appreciate your service, and it's up to you, but it does work nicely if they kind of know, oh, it's about that time of this cycle for another charter revision commission. It does seem to work well. So.
What dates, when is this room available or not available?
I think most Wednesdays and Thursdays we can get in here at about 4. If 4 o'clock works with everyone's schedule, we could be consistent about that if you could just have a day of the month that you were looking at. Obviously, I will need to go back and just confirm that that date would be available as you choose them, but looking ahead, that was pretty consistent.
Well, I guess to me, if we were to correspond with today, because this is the second Wednesday, so if we were to look at the second Wednesday, would put us on the 14th of October, the 11th of November, and the 9th of December.
Mr. Chair, I believe 11th of November is Veterans Day.
Yeah.
Oh, it normally is. But in that week, could we go on Thursday the 12th?
Those dates work for me.
So October 14th, November 12th, and December 9th. And then January 13th? Or would you rather have it before sessions? Does the session start then?
I believe, Mr. Chair, that it would start, I can get you that information.
Okay. So let's, because I guess the question would be if we'd want to go the 6th or 7th of January or the 13th or 14th.
Mr. Chair, looking at my calendar, unfortunately, Wednesday, December 9, I would have a conflict. I'm supposed to be in trial that day, but I could do Thursday, December 10.
Okay. Does Thursday the 10th work for everyone?
December?
Yes.
Yep.
I have another board meeting that meets at that same time.
Let's put it at Wednesday, then December 9th. That should be fine.
Okay. Wednesday, December 9. And how about the January?
We can do the earlier of the days, so maybe I think the session has already begun on the 13th.
So the 6th or 7th? We did Wednesday the 6th? Okay, so Wednesday the 6th of January. I think when we... Do we need a motion to adopt that as our schedule, or just say that that's what's
Just
going to be?
before you finalize your schedule, if I may, Mr. Chairman, we can have members phone in as well, just in case you are physically not present, you can still attend a meeting telephonically, and we can make that happen. So if that changes your scheduling just before finalizing it.
If that's the case, Mr. Chairman, if you'd rather have it on the 13th of January, that's fine for me too.
I think the 6th is fine with me. It'll give us a little bit more time if we have to have a second meeting that month.
Makes sense.
Okay? So the 6th. So, is everybody in agreement with that? That would work? Okay. When we have the minutes for this meeting, that will be circulated. The next item of business that was on the agenda was the consideration of whether and or when to extend invitations for input to the mayor, city council members, and city directors. And I guess my preference would be to invite them by section if we could.
Mr. Chair, I have already been contacted by a member of the council previously, so I would like to see the council be the first group that is invited.
And you would open that up that they could speak of anything?
Yeah, if they have any recommendations. Or else, if we're going to go by sections of the charter, we could always advertise that fact and then have any department head or counselor come forward at that time, which I see the city attorney shaking his head yes, so maybe that is the best way to go.
Yes.
Thank you, Sue. So then if we had a situation with our next meeting in October, we'd invite the mayor of the city council for input?
Well, I guess that what I'm looking at is that as we go through, if we let it be known, I mean, they would kind of then have a standing invitation for the section of the charter that we're reviewing.
Okay, so it would match up with however we get that parceled off.
If that's how we're parceling it out, that would work also, but we just have to make sure that they are aware of what we are covering at that meeting. And for the issue that I was contacted about, you know, I could personally make an invitation.
Okay. So then what it would look like then, our framework would be, for instance, now this is just as an example. If we said in October we'd do sections, Articles 1, 2, and 3, November 4, 5, and 6, and December 7, 8, 9, that would be out there. And any comments that on those sections would be there. Of course, there can always be public comments, and I guess if people wanted to talk about something else, they could. We may not be prepared to respond to them.
Right.
But at least we could have it and have it there. Do you recall how we split it up last time?
Mr. Chairman, exactly how you stated, and I would suggest too, we could put it on the agenda so that you're alerting the public. Sections 1, 2, 3 will be, we could even put the titles in of what the articles are so they know the subject matter.
Okay. Is everybody in agreement then if we did that in October, November, December, it'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and would circulate it that way, that would be discussed at the meetings. I think at each meeting we'll still take, there'll be input from the public, of course. There'll be, and the mayor and the city council, city directors, however that goes. And that should work. So I think that would, so if we look at our agenda and how that would be, we have our meeting dates and what the subject matter would be. The other question that I would put out there is, last time we read the articles at the meeting, which takes a fair amount of time. Would everyone be comfortable with having read that prior to the meeting and be well-versed on those three? It
Yes.
wouldn't mean that you may have to read 4 or 5 pages from month to month. Okay, and I think if we put it out there, there are enough access to the charter for members of the public and the city council and the mayor that they could read that in advance of the meeting as well.
Correct. Mr. Chairman, it is on the city website. If you go to the attorney's page or the city clerk's page, either one has a link to American Legal Publishing, and that would have both the charter as well as city ordinances. So it's directly available on the website. And if anyone has any problems, feel free to call our office. We'll make sure you get an electronic copy or a hard copy, one way or the other.
Okay. So I think we're seeing how our work plan is going to lay out for the next 4 months as to how that would go and how the meetings would go. It will come. An item, I guess, that I will mention everyone is that there are times that at the end, it is going to be a decision as to which ones we see should go forward to a vote of the people, because it is the citizens of Sioux Falls that will determine whether or not the charter gets changed. Our job is to look at it and see if there are things that we think should be changed. And there's probably a limit as to how many items we can have out there, and how they can be explained and how important they are. So it's an interesting process to go through, and I look at all the work that has been done to get to this point, and how our city functions and does so well. So works out. Okay. Now the next item is ground rules for commission votes, majority versus supermajority.
I can explain that if you will. Every other commission that I'm aware of has done it where before placing an item for a proposal onto the ballot itself, the group agrees that it will require a supermajority vote. A majority vote would be 3 yeses, a supermajority would be 4. That way there's not complete unison among the group, but a supermajority to ensure that the Charter Revision Commission is recommending that particular item to be placed on the ballot for the voters' consideration.
In past on the commissions, has that been the supermajority?
As far as I'm aware, Carrie's been doing this longer than I have.
And I think on the 2 that I've been involved with, it's been unanimous votes from this commission.
As far as actual items, yes, yeah, but yeah, the ground rule was supermajority.
Okay.
Yep.
So I'll take a vote on, would someone like to make a motion that we would use a supermajority before we'd advance an item?
Mr. Chairman, I'd make a motion that we require a supermajority for placing any items on the ballot.
I'll second that motion.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. I think we've handled the discussion of future meeting dates. That might have gotten merged up above, so my apologies for not following the agenda. You may want to reconsider your vote. Okay, but at this point, at each meeting, we'll ask for public input. Is there anyone who would like to present. Please give your name and what the item is.
Hi, Greg Neitzer, Sioux Falls. I just want to preface this by saying that I've only started looking at this for about a week, and I want to talk about Article 6, specifically initiative and referendum, and I can come back in a few months with some more solidified ideas. So in 2014, we had an unprecedented amount of activity in that regard. We had 2 initiatives and 2 referendums. And when we think about what the function of those are, it provides a way for citizens to bypass their representatives and address a grievance. It's a safety valve in our form of government, empowering citizens who have grievances. And as such, the elected body, as well as the government that body represents, has a conflict of interest and a vested stake in the outcome of those petitions. In late 2013, I formed a ballot question committee named Forward Zoning. We advocated for the adoption of shaped places. We actually, in that regard, so we advocated the city's position, not officially because we were an independent body, but it just so happened we were advocating for shaped places. So as a group of private citizens, we were free to advocate all we want, and we tried to do that and tried to educate the citizens. The city, however, is barred from advocating. Because of that prohibition, the city, in my opinion, should have stayed completely out of the issue, and that includes the educational presentations that they had. Whether or not it was education or advocation is something that's a serious debate. I personally attended most of those. I think the city employees did an incredible job in trying to do their best to stay objective and try to put it forward as best they could. But I think they were in a really bad position because they're not supposed to advocate. And when you take something even like the zoning ordinance, it's so large, it gets very difficult to not be perceived as advocating. For example, they might say, well, the new ordinance requires a buffer yard, while the old one does not. That's completely factual, but it could be construed as being advocation. So it was very, very difficult, I think, for them. So I think it's virtually impossible for the city to be objective, no matter how hard they try, because we're all human beings. That conflict of interest creates a clear and present danger that the information presented, and just as important, the information that's left out could be slanted or it could be subjective. Citizens, including myself, I think were perfectly able to advocate. And then in addition to that, there was the city attorney's explanation. And once again, I think they probably did their best, but I have the city attorney's explanation here, and they're quite lengthy. And they run into the same problem where there was, when you look at what's in and what's out, you can read certain things, for example, with the shaped places, where it talks about shaped places does this and the old one didn't do that. Once again, it gets really dancing very close. And I think once again, when you have the city brought forward shaped places and they adopted it, it's very hard to think that they didn't have a little bit of something going on in their minds where they were, maybe selectively editing. And that's from somebody who was advocating for it. And I'll tell you, when we saw the ballot language, all of us as a group said, we couldn't have done this better if we did it ourselves. At that point, we thought we probably had a slam dunk. And I'm not trying to attack anybody personally, but that's just how we felt. And I guess maybe the last issue is none of us saw the ballot language, as far as I know. There may have been some group, but the groups I talked to, none of us saw the ballot language until it was done. It was a done deal. So there were at least 2 groups that I know of that did pursue court action to try to because they had objections to the ballot language. And as far as I know, what they had found out was that it was too late. There was nothing they could do about it. It was already on the ballot. Well, they weren't presented the language. So I guess what I'd like you to think about is coming up with a way to explicitly prohibit the expenditure of city funds or resources in any regard when it comes to the initiative or referendum, specifically when it comes to anything that would be educational or discussing it. And obviously that wouldn't prohibit city employees from doing that as private citizens, but just not using any city time for anything that could be construed as education. Looking at number 2 would be the ballot language. I'm still trying to review what state law requires, but making the ballot language as essentially succinct as possible. A vote yes is this, and a vote no is this, period, end of issue. I think that might be all that's required, not necessarily this large text. Now, what the city clerk could do would be to come up with essentially, like we see at the state level, like sort of a ballot, a guide where my side could write what we thought, the pro side, and then there could be the con side, and then the con side can put their thing out too. And trying to be completely objective, I don't think the other side had a fair chance when I read that language. I think it helped us, but it didn't help them. Or it wasn't really fair to them. And then I think the last thing is a requirement that maybe the entire public, but at the very least ballot question committees, all get a chance to review the ballot language before it's solidified 10 days, or I'm not an attorney, I don't know exactly what that would be, but something in which there's a remedy so that they can, if they have a gripe with it, they can approach the city, and even if they want to take legal action, they can do so, just so everybody's due process is preserved. So I'm going to come up with more solid ideas hopefully in the next few months, but that's what I had so far. Thank you.
That will be on the agenda in the November meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Bruce Danielson, Sioux Falls. I'm glad Greg was able to bring up some of the things he was just talking about with the election, because in the last city election, I was involved in all 4 of the ballot measures, 3 of them from the losing side and 1 of them from the winning side. And I can tell you, as a person that actually brought about one of the court actions that almost postponed the city election, I have some real issues about the way that the election was actually conducted from the ballot standpoint. Because as we found in all 4 of the ballot issues that were citizen-driven, we found that each one of those had actually been rewritten by the city attorney's office in one way or another, so the original intent and sometimes the facts of each one of the issues were actually changed. And the city attorney's explanation of each one of those items, and I don't know if it was this city attorney that actually sat and wrote them or one of the other ones, but they actually did not match our original intent on any one of the issues. And that's really disturbing when we go out and we collect 27,000 signatures to put these items on the ballot, and then to go and get the actual ballot after it's been printed and find out that they did in fact include all these errors. And then we had no way in the end to dispute it because they'd already printed the ballots. We tried to get the ballot language fixed and we were rebuffed. And that's what caused us on April 7th of last year to actually take the city to circuit court to stop the election or the use of the ballot that was there. On the one in particular was the Spellerberg pool issue. And we can talk about technicalities of what a date means and so on, but yet when it really gets down to it, it's the sanctity of the ballot. And the sanctity of the ballot said the information that we put on, we circulated a petition. We promised the people who were involved in those petitions, signing those petitions, that this is what it's going to say on the ballot, and then to find out that the city attorney or an attorney can sit and rewrite everything before it's printed, and we have no way to go back and verify that that information is correct, that it means what we wanted it to mean, and so the election becomes kind of slanted in a way that's against what we were trying to do. And that's really disturbing for somebody who circulated his first petition in 1972. And I've circulated a lot of petitions through the years, and there's always been, when you read this information right here, that's what you're going to see on the ballot. And when we got the ballot, it wasn't what we had actually circulated. And that upset us. And there was no time frame in there that allowed us to have a chance to go in and correct it. So when we took that to court, we found out from the Secretary of State that the only thing that's required on the ballot is the bold-face header that's at the top. And everything else is just an explanation that says what a yes vote means and what a no vote means. All the rest of that is not necessary to be printed on the ballot. So we ended up using 17-inch pieces of paper to vote on, when actually we could have used the standard 14, and Lori and Bob Litz, in charge of the counting of the ballots, wouldn't have had so many issues with the crashing of the voting machines, because I was involved in that side of the election too and got to watch the machines crash, because the ballots were so long and they were so heavy that they crashed the old machines. So there's a lot of things that are involved with the election that I'm very particular to, and why I asked to be on the election review committee that the Minnehaha County had, and was the chairman of that to investigate why we were having some of these other issues. So I'm rather passionate about the area of balloting and elections and doing it proper. And that's one of my key things. And I'm glad we're going to split this up into different sections for each meeting, so I won't go through everything that I have here, but there's 6 things that I really want to talk about. One of them we've already done, but how the appointment to boards and commissions are done. And there's a process that I learned about in Omaha that I think is very fascinating, and it allows the city council to also have a chance to be involved in the process of selecting members and balancing the interests on an appointed board. And I'll get into that more at another time. One of the other things I've been studying is the direct election of the city attorney. So that way the city attorney's primary job is the protection of the charter, and it has nothing to do with the protection of any one particular individual who is in the city, in a city office, either appointed or elected. And that the city attorney shall not appear before any board or commission as a representative of an official. Last year, I went before the ethics board on 2 different occasions to discuss some issues, and in one of those, the city attorney actually took the position of one of the defendants on the ethics board, so we couldn't even question the individual that we called before the ethics board. We could not even have him in the room for those 2 times we called him before us so he could answer our issues that were involved. He had other people do his work for him, and that's absolutely wrong. If somebody goes before the ethics board, if their name is called up, I don't care what their time frame is, how long their day is, or anything else, that person needs to be there to defend themselves. And that was an eye-opener to how the process worked. In the city council, there's a group of us that would like to see the chair of the city council lead all city council meetings. And we'll get into this in more detail, but the mayor is required to be in attendance in the city council, as it happens in a lot of cities. And the mayor may lead the administration discussions and issue presentations in front of the city council. The mayor is required to approach the podium in order to vote to break a tie. And we want to see that there's a balance in how the management of the city council works. And I'm glad we have a former member of the city council, so we can talk about some of these things and see how it all works. Greg did a great job. I wish we could have rehearsed it with the issues brought with the initiative and referendum. I won't go into it in detail because I think he did a fantastic job, but we do already have a problem with state law and the city charter being violated last year and how the advocational education sessions were conducted, and that's wrong. One of the things we learned recently in another situation was we seem to have this loophole, and state law and city charter both say that more stringent law or ordinance, when an issue arises, is what is supposed to be followed. Well, we had a special meeting at the regular time with the regular agenda because they didn't get the agenda posted. And I filed a complaint to get that meeting stopped because they should have had it at a special time. It could have even been an hour later. But at least that meeting, by state law, was actually illegal and by city ordinance. And if any one of those individuals that had that situation that night that lost or won, they could have fought it, and they probably would have won in court because state law is very clear on it. But we went ahead and had a meeting that we should have had at least 98 hours advance notice to, and we ended up having 24 hours notice to. That it was a special meeting called, and it was really strange. So that's one of the things that we would like to see if we could tighten up in the appropriate section. And then I personally have fallen into this situation, and so have a few other citizens in Sioux Falls, and that's the City of Sioux Falls shall follow legal service of code violations, and the City of Sioux Falls shall follow state law on all service of citations. Right now, we have code enforcement going out and just willy-nilly dropping pieces of paper in people's yards and saying that they've served some kind of a citation or ordinance, and then doing legal action against it, and it doesn't follow state law. Now, last year, I was in court on one of these situations, and one of the reasons we succeeded was because the judge determined that we did not get proper service. Talked to Dan Daly, I.L. Wiederman, they also have the same situations in their cases. And it happens, and through the year, as we've been watching the city work with code enforcement and people coming up to this very podium, they're talking about all of these times that they have not been given legal service. And we would like to have that addressed in the appropriate point. So thank you very much for your time. I would like to spend some time with each of you and work with you and try to explain what this is all about, and I appreciate your time.
Okay. And I think in the past we've had a time frame as far as for public input.
Yeah.
We didn't have that tonight, but I think that's an item that we'll probably address in the future.
That's not a problem. This was a long one today, and I apologize. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your input. Any other comments from the public? Any other items that anyone wants to discuss? I think we have our meeting schedule and agendas set out, and that it'll be a supermajority, and that we will have this read ahead of time, and we'll make sure that it gets posted so anybody who wants can have access to the charter ahead of time. And the meetings will be at 4 o'clock.
And those agendas are also sent to city council members, mayor's staff, city directors each time as well.
Okay. Any other business? Hearing none, we stand adjourned.